The unexpected miracle dawn lay heavy over the village. The air was cold, almost cruel, and seemed to cut the skin like thin blades. There were no stars that night, only a deep, silent darkness that weighed heavily on the hearts of the inhabitants. It was as if the sky itself silently watched what was about to happen. Inside the small chapel high on the hill, Saint Roch remained kneeling. He sought neither rest nor comfort. He sought guidance. His hands were clasped, his face bowed, his knees marked by continuous prayer. Since his arrival, he had spent his days caring for the sick and his nights pleading with the Almighty for mercy. "Lord," he murmured, "I surrender to you every tear I have seen, every fever I have touched, every groan that echoes in this village. You know the limits of human strength, and you know I have surpassed them. But you are greater. Your grace sustains what my body cannot." The candles flickered like tongues of fire, casting shadows that danced on the walls. It was a simple, humble setting, but it had become the heart of the village, a place where God seemed to listen more closely. Roque lifted his face and placed his hand on his chest. "If it pleases you, O Lord, use me more. But if the lives of these your children can no longer be saved by human hands, then send your own help." And it was at that moment that the wind changed. A gentle breeze entered through the chapel window, despite it being closed. The candles all tilted in the same direction, as if greeting an invisible presence. The flame did not go out, on the contrary, it intensified, illuminating the room with a strangely pure light. Roque stood up slowly, sensing something different in the air. A peace so profound, it almost sounded like music. A silence so profound, it almost sounded like a voice. And then he heard. "I heard your prayer." It wasn't a sound that traveled through the air. It was a voice that pierced the soul. Roque immediately fell to his knees, tears streaming down, his face uncontrollably. "Sir," the voice continued, "I am with you. My hand reaches out over this village. The night is deep, but the light will not be long in coming." And then the presence ceased, like a breeze that retreats, but it left behind a trail of certainty. Roque stood up with renewed strength. He knew that something was about to happen, not through his own merit, but because divine mercy had already descended upon that people. The following morning, the village awoke to a sound it hadn't heard in weeks: birdsongs. It was just a sparrow here, another there, but for the residents, it sounded like a sign. Birds have always been the first to leave places overtaken by death, and the first to return when life begins to breathe again. The news spread like wildfire. The children in that house, they slept through the entire night. The feverish patient who wasn't responding, ate earlier today. Old Rachel's cough disappeared. The people were not yet daring to celebrate fully, but hope grew like wildfire in dry brush. Roque, however, knew he needed to see it with his own eyes. He first went to the house of Elijah, the man he had seen on the verge of death earlier. Upon entering, he was greeted by a scene that almost brought him to tears. Elias was sitting, weak, yes, pale, yes, but conscious, breathing effortlessly, like someone waking from a long sleep. "Good heavens," he murmured upon seeing Roque. "I dreamed of you. I dreamed that you touched my chest, and a light enveloped me." Roque smiled humbly. "The light wasn't mine, brother." From there, he went to the children's house, and when he opened the door, he found the 3 little girls sitting there, wrapped in blankets, eating bread softened in milk, something unthinkable until the night before. The mother, upon seeing Roque, fell to her knees. They woke up asking for food. The fever disappeared as if it had fled. Roque embraced the woman and the children, and his eyes filled with silent tears. "God passed through this house," he said. The news spread even faster. People began to leave their homes hesitant, but driven by hope. Those who were sick called for Roque, and those who were healthy asked for help. And then something happened that no one expected. In the central square, where the sick were taken when there was nothing more that could be done, a man began to shout, "I can breathe! I can breathe!" Roque ran towards him. He was a young man, his skin scarred by the plague, who had barely been able to lift his torso the day before. Now he stood weak, but standing, breathing deeply as if experiencing life for the first time. People started to cry. Some fell to their knees. Others raised their hands to the sky. and the square filled with a spontaneous, desperate, and sincere chorus. Praise be to God. The Most High has remembered us. He sent his servant. He sent his healing. Roque raised his arms above the crowd. Don't celebrate me, he said in a loud voice. Celebrate him who hears from heaven, him who wipes away tears, him who heals invisible and visible wounds. Everything that happened here is from him. And at that moment, something even more profound happened. The whole village began to sing an ancient psalm, learned from their ancestors. The Lord is my help, my strength. Whom shall I be afraid of? Even though shadows may rise against me, I will trust in him. The song ascended as an offering, and the village, once shrouded in silence, vibrated with life. The miracle had begun. It wasn't just physical healing, it was a spiritual transformation. It was about restoring trust, and everyone knew the God who visited that place had come not only to alleviate pain, but to renew hearts, unite families, and rekindle the faith that fear had tried to stifle. That's how the unexpected happened. That's how a broken village began to be rebuilt. And that is how Saint Roque became on that day not just a caretaker, but a living witness to them. God who answers. Gratitude that echoes to this day. The sun that rose the following morning was not the same as the one that had illuminated the previous days. It didn't seem like just light, it seemed like a promise. Its brilliance touched the rooftops, the windows, the trees twisted by drought, and even the dirt roads as if washing everything with a golden mantle. It was the first sunrise in weeks that the village had seen without fear. The doors began to open slowly, as if the people were testing the reality around them. Children appeared, shy but smiling. Women walked towards the well with vessels in their hands, and men came out to resume the work that had been so neglected. But something was different. Everyone's gaze held a new kind of reverence, as if they understood they had witnessed something sacred. And at the center of all this new life was Saint Roque. He walked between the houses without fanfare, without pride, with the same humility with which he had arrived. Many called him the saint, others the envoy, but he only smiled, always repeating, "Do not look at the messenger, my brothers, look at the one who sent the message." That morning, Elias's family prepared a small meal. It was simple bread, hot broth, dried fruit, but for them, it was a feast. Elias, once on the verge of death, now walked slowly through the courtyard, supported by his wife. When Roque approached, Elias immediately fell to his knees. "Don't do that," said Roque, trying to lift him up. "All glory belongs to the Most High." But Elijah insisted, "I know, but I kneel not before the man, but before the instrument of God who brought light to my home. If I am alive today, it is because God heard his prayer." Roque held the face of the man marked by illness and now by gratitude. "Rise, my brother, let us walk together in the light of grace." And so they spent a few minutes talking about faith, life, and hope like two old friends. But news of that conversation spread quickly through the village, as did everything involving Roque. The mother of the 3 children also wanted to express her gratitude. She prepared something even more symbolic. She washed and sewed a small cloak for Roque with her own hands, using scraps of her children's clothes. When she handed over the gift, with tears in her eyes, she said, "This fabric was meant for mourning, but now it is life. I want you to wear it, to remember that God has transformed sadness into joy." Roque received the mantle with great humility. Every stitch she put in is a prayer. You can't imagine the power it carries. The children clung to Roque's legs, laughing and calling him Uncle Saint. He knelt down, hugged them, and said, "Grow in faith, little ones. One day you will be the ones bringing light where there is darkness." Gratitude spread like perfume. The entire village began to organize itself to express in some way its gratitude to the God who had preserved them. Some suggested a grand banquet. Others wanted to build a new chapel. Others wanted to erect a memorial. But Roque, listening to everyone, simply said, "The greatest gratitude is a converted heart. If you want to thank God, live justly, care for one another, and don't let fear divide what faith has united." But the most striking scene occurred in the afternoon. when leader Isaac summoned all the people to gather in the same square that, days before, had echoed only with sorrow. Now, the place was filled with entire families. Young people, the elderly, children, all gathered under the open sky. When Roque approached, the crowd, without planning it, fell silent. It was a reverent, profound silence. Isaac raised his voice. Brothers and sisters, today we celebrate the mercy that reached us. This man, this servant of God, not only entered the village when everyone else was fleeing, but he touched our sick when no one dared to approach. He did what the strong fear to do. Roque lowered his head humbly. Isaac continued, but he always reminded us that it is not human strength. It is the divine hand. The miracle we witnessed is the work of the Almighty. We were a people without hope, and now we are a people who have seen the face of mercy. Then Isaac made a gesture, and the whole village, as one body, knelt down. A spontaneous chorus arose, and it wasn't a rehearsed song, it was broken. Emotional voices singing an ancient psalm, with tears in their eyes. Blessed be the Lord, who did not reject our prayer, nor has he withheld his mercy from us. The sound rose as an offering. It was the sound of a people grateful not only for physical healing, but because they have rediscovered faith, unity, and purpose. Roque watched the scene and his eyes filled with tears. He also knelt down and prayed silently. Thank you, sir, because my life belongs to you, and I was just a thread in the tapestry of your grace. Thank you for allowing my steps, so fragile, that the footsteps of these your children might touch. When the people rose up, one thing became clear. The village would never be the same again. They had come back to life, not only because the plague had receded, but because the heart of the community had been restored. The bonds once broken by fear or rebuilt by faith. Old differences were erased by shared suffering, and a new unity was born from that miracle. Gratitude was not an event, it was now a way of life. In the following days, people began to write down the story of what had happened. They told their children, recorded it on wooden tablets, sang it at the wells, and repeated it in the fields. It was God who saved us. It was God who sent his servant. It was God who heard our cry. That village, forgotten by the great nations, isolated on the maps, now carried a flame, the flame of remembrance of a miracle. And whenever someone spoke about what had happened, they didn't just mention the cure, but he mentioned love, compassion, faith reborn. Gratitude echoed, and it would continue to echo for generations. For when God intervenes in human history, time does not erase it. Time honors the legacy of the holy hero. The sun rose again over the village, as if it itself wanted to witness what the heavens were consolidating there. Not just a cure, but the birth of an eternal legacy. The houses, previously closed, now had open doors. The children, previously silent, were now running. The old men, once resigned to mourning, now raised their walking sticks as if celebrating restitution. But above all, there was something that no one could touch, only feel. A faint scent of incense seemed to waft through the air on certain mornings, as if it came from nowhere, and from everywhere at once. It was a sign that the saint was still walking around there, even though their feet no longer touched the ground. The village that became a witness the survivors began to repeat, like psalms, everything they had seen. They were simple people, men and women who barely knew how to write, but who now carried a certainty that no pen could record with more force than their hearts. God sent a righteous one among us. The fame of Saint Roch spread faster than any epidemic had ever spread before. Pilgrims began to arrive, first in small numbers, then by the dozens, and soon in droves. They were bringing ribbons tied around wrists, simple foods, small wooden crosses, jars of water to wash the place where they believed the saint had prayed. And above all, they were bringing hope, as if they were carrying a burning flame in their own hands. There was no suffering that did not find an echo there. There was no despair that did not find a breath of relief there. Because when a village is touched by a miracle, she herself becomes a living sermon. The mystery of the dog that was never seen again. Many asked about the dog that had accompanied Saint Roque, the silent companion, guardian, messenger of God. But no one could say for sure what had happened to him. Some swore. They saw him, the morning after the great miracle, sitting in front of the small makeshift chapel, as if watching over something sacred. Others said they saw him climb the hill before dawn, walking slowly, without looking back. And there were those who said in a low voice, almost afraid of being overheard, that the dog had never been just a dog. It was an angel who had taken animal form to protect the saint at a time when men lacked the courage to do so. The fact is, he never showed up again. And for everyone, his absence became an even greater presence. Building the place of miracle where Saint Roch had knelt, the earth seemed darker, as if it had absorbed not only the weight of his body, but the weight of all the suffering for which he had interceded. There, the residents decided to build a small temple. They had no gold, they had no marble, they didn't have any famous artists, but they had faith and they had gratitude. With simple planks, stones gathered from the river, and an altar carved by trembling hands, they built a sanctuary that did not impress the eyes, but that stirred the spirit. And when they placed the small image of Saint Roque, there made of rustic wood, with a dog at his feet, something extraordinary happened. The place was filled with a vivid silence. Silence that was not the absence of sound. Silence that was presence. The silence made anyone who entered feel seen, touched, welcomed. It was the same silence that precedes a miracle. Fame that crossed borders, the news spread. No traveler passed through that region without hearing, somewhere, the story of the holy pilgrim who faced the plague without fleeing, who touched wounds that no one dared to touch, who received a dog sent by God as protection, who transformed pain into hope. Before long, church authorities found out. Reports have been submitted. Bishops wrote testimonies, and gradually, the truth became established. Saint Roque was not just a holy man. He was a sign that God always raises someone up in the darkest times, a sign that no suffering is so great that it cannot be illuminated by a light from above, a sign that faith can walk through valleys that medicine cannot reach. The saint had become more than just a protector of the village. It had become the protector of peoples who fear plague, disease, and sudden death. And that title would echo through the centuries, the legacy engraved not in stone, but in generations. Years have passed, after decades, after centuries, and the village never ceased to mention what had happened there. Generations have succeeded one another like waves breaking on the beach, but the saint's story continued. Standing firm as a rock in the midst of the storm, the mothers taught their children, when fear comes, remember Saint Roque. The elders reminded the young people, when you don't know what to do, kneel down as he did. And every year, on the day dedicated to the saint, the village was filled with candles, and the streets lit up as if heaven itself descended to earth to repeat, once again, the righteous live, the saint remains, the miracle continues. Eternal echoes, they say that on quiet nights, when the wind blows across the wooden rooftops, it's still possible to hear something like footsteps, light steps, firm steps, footsteps of someone who continues to watch. And sometimes, in the exact silence before dawn, some swear they hear a faint bark in the distance. It's not a sound of fear, it's a God sound for protection. It's as if the sky was saying, I'm still here, and that's it. Because Saint Roque walked through that village once, but his legacy lives on to this day. In every heart that fears illness, in every family that cries out for healing, in each person who, alone, repeats the same prayer that he prayed, Lord, if you will, you can heal us, and God continues to answer.